I think it's important to actively recommend contact lenses as part of your consultation, because really you're there to give people the widest opportunity and look at all the different options. And a lot of people assume that they're not suitable for contact lenses unless you as the practitioner actually recommend them. So have a think about what they'd be suitable for and then just make the suggestion. If someone's hesitant about contact lenses, probably the easiest way to allay their fears is open one up. Let them touch it, show it to them. It's, a lot of lenses are soft and squidgy, let them handle it. Maybe put it on the end of the finger and close their eyes and say, well, can you feel it? And then they'll notice, well, I can feel it's there, but it's not going to be uncomfortable. So explain how it's going to feel. And actually a lot of the time you won't feel it at all, which is the point. Well, you need to explain to the patient the next steps. So if they're really interested in contact lenses, go through what's going to happen. I'm going to take some more measurements, I'm going to select a pair for you and we'll pop them on, let you have a look at the world, have a wander outside, see what it's like, feel what it's like. And then if you're happy and I'm happy and they fit well, then we teach you how to get them in and out. So I've got to be happy that that person will take the instruction seriously. It's a medical device at the end of the day, and that they're motivated to wear them enough. I've got to be happy that that lens is sitting okay on the eye as well. I want it to move slightly with every blink, but not too much that it makes it uncomfortable or it moves around too much. But on the slit lamp, I've got to make sure that that fit is good, so that when they wander off in that lens for the next couple of weeks, that's not going to sit too tight, especially at the end of the day's wear, which can create problems. It's important to convey the risks of contact lens wear, which are small if they're looked after properly. You don't want to terrify the person so that they're just not wearing them at all, but you want to get them to the point where they understand that if they don't look after them properly, then there is a risk of infection. And some of that infection isn't just itchy and uncomfortable, it's serious lose an eye type infection. But with proper handling, proper hand washing, then there's no reason it should happen to them. You know, these serious infections are very rare, but they do need to be taken seriously. I always warn the patients at the beginning and regularly during aftercare about tap water and water in general. Saying something like, well, it's important to wash your hands thoroughly, but also to dry them, because there's certain bugs that live in tap water that can cause serious infection. The worst being a little amoeba, who, if it gets trapped underneath your contact lens, likes to eat cornea, and it's very, very, very painful. And it lives in tap water, seawater, jacuzzis, swimming pools. The patient has to understand what they're getting into. They need to understand that it's a medical device, it needs to be looked after. There's some risk of infection, although it's slight if they're looked after properly. It's important as the practitioner to understand the patient's lifestyle and what they're intending to use the lenses for. If they're a cyclist and they're just going to wear them at the weekends for cycling, then you might want to say daily disposable lenses. If they're a runner, then nowadays we can have reactor light lenses, so you don't have to have your sunglasses on a sunny day. And it's going to depend on the prescription as well, what lens availability there is. So not everything's available in every prescription. So sometimes you might have to go to quite a specialist lens to correct that vision, not forgetting rigid lenses still exist. Scleral lenses can pretty much deal with any prescription. There's always an option for that patient in front of you, and it's tailoring what they want them for, how long they're going to be wearing them. Do I need to get more oxygen to that eye because they're going to be wearing them literally 24/7? Each brand of lens has its own pros and cons. So it's sort of weighing that up and being familiar with all those different brands that you fit, and then you can make that choice having actually tried them out in the real world on real people. To get familiar with brands, it's probably a good idea to order in some trial lenses and try them out. See how they handle, put them in and out on yourself, and just see what it's like, feel what they're like. I get a little bias towards lenses that I personally find comfortable, and it means I end up recommending them to patients probably more. But then it depends, you know, one will have UV protection and that person is a tennis player and they're going to be wearing them outside a lot and you want the UV protection maybe. So there's different things to think about across each brand. So it's really horses for courses. You've got to tailor your recommendation to that person. So when a patient's in my chair, I've done the checks, we've talked about what type of lens we're going to have, and we're ready to put them in. So I'll normally let them know what it's going to feel like. I'll probably try and convey that they're going to be more aware of that lens than they actually are when it goes in, because I want them to be pleasantly surprised. I don't want to frighten them off that this is going to hurt. So I'll normally say something like, well, when it goes in, you might be aware of it. It shouldn't hurt. If it hurts, I will take it straight out. There's no pain. If you want that lens out, I will take it straight out. But at worst, you might feel like there's a bit of fluff or an eyelash in your eye. or you might not feel it at all. And now they're ready for some sort of sensation. So if that lens, when it goes on, has a slight air bubble underneath it, or there's a little speck of mascara that was still on their eyelid as it went in, they can feel that lens. They don't panic because they're ready for some sort of sensation. But most of the time, a soft, especially daily disposable soft lens, you put it on and they go, oh no, I can't really feel that. And they're happy. If they're a little bit aware of it, then of course you can do the scleral swish, where you move it onto the white of the eye, wobble it about a little bit and push it back into the centre, and that will often get any air bubbles out from underneath the lens, or if there's a little speck of fluff or something, it just washes fresh tears underneath the lens and just lets that settle really quickly, and then they go, oh, that's instantly better. If it's not, you need to take that lens out, rinse it, clean it, look at it. So when you're then teaching a patient, you need to convey the hygiene all the way through, so everything you do needs to be very hygienic. You're not going to sort of show somebody on yourself touching your eye and then touch their contact lenses. You demonstrably go and wash your hands again. You don't want your hair falling in the way, so tie your hair back first, wash your hands thoroughly. I usually show them on me, I'll put one in and out on myself just to show them what I'm doing, show them what to expect, then demonstrably wash my hands, make sure they do the same. We dry them very thoroughly, make a bit of a show of cleaning the surface that we used beforehand and laying out some paper towels so that they see me make that area hygienic to start with. And then of course if they're sort of touching their eyes and then they do this on their jeans, which they usually do, and then back to their eyes, wash your hands again. You drum that in from the start. Once I've shown them how I get the lens in and out, I'll then get them to practice lid holding before we move on to the lens, because 80% of this is about lid holding. The lens is the last 20%. If you can master the lid holding, then you've got a chance of getting that lens in and out. Rather than just pulling the eyelid up, I quite often will say, well, think of it like a garage door, that the eyelid goes up and back over the eye. So you're trying to sort of hold the lashes against that bone. So bring the eyelid up and back and hold the lashes against the eyebrow bone, and then you can't blink even if you want to, because the moment that lens comes towards you, you're going to want to blink. So if you can get those eyelids under control, you've got half a chance of getting it in. Once the lens is on, you let those lids go straight away, the lens will fold back up and it will come out. So once that lens is on, you're not done yet. We're going to roll the eye up, down, left and right, and that just smooths the lens flat against the surface of the eye. Then you can let the lids go. I'll quite often explain that beforehand. So get them trying the eyelids first, then you talk about putting the lens on the finger and have a go at getting that lens in. Some people are a bit more flinchy than others. The strong blink reflex is something to overcome. I sympathise with that because I have a strong blink reflex. It took me years to get a lens in and out confidently and quickly. It's about emphasising the lid holding and that they're getting a good grip before they start thinking about the lens. So if they're really, really blinky, you'll probably find they can't put that lens right onto the middle of the eye. So it's a lot easier if they can look away at the last second. So they might use a mirror to line everything up and get that lens just a centimetre from the eye and then look towards the nose, plonk it on the white bit, and their blink reflex won't be quite as strong. And the lens will centre itself anyway, so get them to not look at what they're doing. If they can look at what they're doing in the mirror rather than the lens coming towards them, sometimes that will lessen the blink reflex as well. But it is just conditioning. Over time, they'll be able to override that reflex and just giving them the confidence that they will be able to do it. It's just the first time it will be really hard, and then the second time it will be slightly less difficult. Once they're over that first hurdle, it gets easier exponentially from that point. The minus lens, you put that on the tip of your finger and you put that towards the eye and it stays whichever angle you're at. The plus lens, let's say it's +6, you put that lens on the tip of your finger. The moment you raise your finger, it drops off or it starts to slide down. Because it's thick in the middle, the weight distribution is different. If you put it on the crux of 2 fingers, it helps you hold that lens a little bit better. Or sometimes the tripod technique where you put 3 fingers together and then you balance the lens in that little tripod. So rather than trying to bring the lens up to the eye, if you bring the head to the lens instead, so maybe put the mirror down flat on the surface they're working over, and they look over that instead of bringing everything up to vertical, that can help. Just remember also that the person who's +6 can't see that lens close up as well as the person who's -6. So they're going to need their glasses on while they're fiddling about with the lens, and then at the last second take their glasses off. So don't banish the glasses from the room. The glasses are going to be there while they're handling the lens, and while they're doing the cleaning as well, they're going to need to put their glasses on, whereas the myope can manage perfectly well without. Same with a really high astigmat as well. They might find they can't see what they're doing without the glasses. Once you've got one lens in, well, that's helpful because now they can see what they're doing to put the other lens in. Magnifying mirrors can help for that reason as well. So if you've got a 2 or 3 times magnification mirror in the practice, well lit situation as well. So if you've got really good lighting, that will help. When I teach removal, it's a few different techniques and it depends on the patient. So if they've got a really wide eye, then when they open their eyes, they've got lots of white of the eye down the bottom and you've got all that room to play with. You want to slide the lens down off the cornea so that when they pinch, they're not pinching the cornea, because that will really make them jump and it'll hurt and it's not safe. So we need to get that lens onto the white of the eye first, onto the sclera, and then you can pinch with the thumb and forefinger. Now if you've got an eye sort of more shaped like mine, it's not big, sort of wide eye, then there's no room down there to pinch the lens off the bottom of the sclera, so I go to the side. But of course, to get all the white of the eye to play with, I need to get them to look towards the nose, and now we've got all this white of the eye available. So then remembering that the lens is going to go with the eye. So if I look over there, now the lens has gone over there, so I need to get my finger right into the corner, drag the lens across, thumb's the backstop, and a little bit of pressure to pinch the lens away. It's a bit like, I usually use the analogy, the wet glass on a coaster. You've got a water tension holding that lens against the eye. So unless you break that tension, the lens is just going to slide about. So you need a little bit of pressure, just with the pinch. Not too much, but just enough to break the water seal that's holding that lens against the eye. So the patient who's struggling to get the contact lens out, it's usually they haven't got good control of the eyelid, especially the top lid is still flapping about, or after a while they've been holding the lid so long that they're holding their brow by this point and not actually the eyelid itself. So sometimes it's just, you need to just stop, dry the fingers again, dry the lids again, have just a few minutes just talking about something else and then come back to it. It gives a chance for the lid to dry off properly and then you can hold it properly. And also it just sort of allows them to calm down a little bit, because it's a really difficult thing to do. I always liken it to ice skating. The first time you try and do it is really, really hard. And then after a while you kind of get the hang of it, and then after a bit you think, well, why was this so difficult in the first place? Teaching someone to touch their eye for the first time is similar. So they're going to be nervous about it. That if they don't do it first time, they're going to get a little frustrated, and then the frustration rises, and then by the 20th time they're ready to punch something. So just come back, let the face stop being so pink, calm down a little bit and resume. So just give them a little pause, a little bit of a chat, back to it a few minutes later, suddenly it can seem easy. One of the mistakes patients often make is they get the technique of moving the lens with the index finger, but the thumb sometimes is flapping about in the air and not actually touching the eye, so it's not providing that backstop to pinch against. Or they're gracing over the top of it too gently, they're not using quite enough pressure to break the water seal, so they just need a little bit of pressure, not too much. Modern daily disposables are quite often really slippery under the finger. That's usually a good feature in that it makes the lens feel more comfortable, the lid glides over it more easily, it doesn't dry out as much. But the problem is when you come to remove it, people struggle to remove it because their finger's slipping across the lens and they're not actually getting any traction on it. So if you dry the fingers and then dry them some more and then dry them some more, and then as you take the lens out, just pause with the finger on the lens for a second and then pinch, and that'll get the finger and the lens stuck together, and then it'll come away. Otherwise you might find you're just slipping over the surface of the lens and it's not coming away, and then the person gets more and more panicked that they can't get them out. The important thing is they're confident they can get them out, because if they get them home and they can't get them out, that's a problem. If they can't get them in, well, that's not as big a deal. Once they look to have mastered the technique of getting the lens in and out, and you're happy and they're happy, they've done it a few times, they're taking their bundle of lenses away, it's really useful to follow it up with a call a couple of days later just to say, how are you doing? Have you managed this at home? Is there anything that you want us to go over again? The thing is, you bombard them with a lot of information during that teach, and I always make sure I give them some written information to go away with as well, because they'll get home and they think, oh, I can't remember what she said about cases, and there's something to do with rinsing the case, and if they've got a sheet to refer to, then that's really useful. I tend to give them a big long list of do's and don'ts. We go through it at the end of the teach just to make sure they know all these things, but then if they can take that home and refer to it later, that's really useful. I tend to use the AOP lists. There's a nice how to look after your contact lenses soft lens guide. There's also one for rigid lenses as well, so I tend to go with that because I trust the source. When they come for the aftercare, you're not just looking at that eye and seeing, okay, is that eye as happy as it was when I first fitted the lens? There's a number of things you're going to be looking at and putting your fluorescein in, but it's also that first touch point since they went away with the lenses. So you need to troubleshoot. Are they having problems with anything? Is there anything that they've forgotten that they might feel silly asking again, because you did tell me but I've forgotten? So give them that opportunity. But also I like to watch them get the lens in and out again, and see if they immediately go for the sink in the corner of the room to wash their hands. And that's it's a point at which you can reiterate all that learning that you gave them in the first place. And have they taken it on board, and are they actually doing it when they get home as well? I think it's sometimes the practitioner can assume that the person who's been wearing contact lenses a long time knows how to do it by now. So occasionally you'll find they surprise you with something that they've been doing a long time that actually you wouldn't have said to do now. I had a patient who used to put his contact lenses in the kitchen, and then he'd carry them, these are rigid lenses, in his mouth to the lounge where his contact lens case and everything was, and then he'd put them away. And the reason he knew his lens was cracked is because he could feel the crack with his tongue. And just unless he'd cracked that lens, he probably wouldn't have told me that that is what he's doing. He's carrying them for safekeeping in his mouth from one room to another. It's very difficult to unpick that behaviour when he's an older gentleman. He's been doing that for ages and he's never had a problem. And I'm trying to come in as this sort of young new practitioner saying, well, you shouldn't be doing that. It's quite a hard thing to do. So you've got to be a bit delicate about how you communicate why that's probably not a good idea. But unless he'd cracked his lens, I probably wouldn't have found that out. So sometimes that reminds me that I really should be asking the patients, so what's your routine? What do you do? What are you cleaning them with? What are you storing them in? And then what do you do? So you've washed your hands, and then what do you do? And sometimes that just is revealing as to they may be making some dangerous mistakes that obviously nothing's happened to the guy in that time he's been doing it. But he is loading that lens with bacteria that he shouldn't be doing, and then he's asking quite a lot of that solution to try and then kill all those bacteria from his mouth. There's always opportunity to just ask them, show me what you do when you take your lenses out. And then you find out they've been storing them in saline, and you kind of go, oh, I never told you could store them in saline. Who told you that was okay? It was this cheap solution that they found on the supermarket shelf, and it only cost about £2, and it's really, really cheap. And it says it's for use with contact lenses, so isn't that okay? You just need to sometimes, with the experienced wearer, stop and say, what are you doing with your lenses? Let's find out if there's something that you could be doing that's safer. A lot of the time, a patient will come in and they've had contact lenses for 20 years and they've always done X, Y and Z this way, and it's never been a problem. And when I try and instill a new way of thinking or point out something that they've maybe been doing wrong all this time, usually you get, but I've never had a problem, I've worn contact lenses all my life. Often my reply is something like, well, I don't wear a seatbelt because I've never had a car accident. And then they kind of go, oh yeah, I see what you mean. Just pointing out that actually, that when you were fitted with contact lenses, there was probably different instruction to what we give these days. So I'll say to them, if you came in as a new wearer today, this is what I'd be telling you. Thinking changes over the time, and new solutions come out, and new methods come out, and new ways of thinking come out, and it's been a long time since anyone actually talked to you about how you handle your contact lenses possibly, and a lot of the information we gave you 20 years ago is probably out of date now. So sometimes actually I'll just quietly slip them the do's and don'ts sheet and say, you know, thinking's probably changed since you were last taught about your contact lenses, so here's your homework. And not necessarily, you know, patronise them in the chair, but hope that they will look at this do's and don'ts and think, oh gosh, I didn't know you weren't supposed to, you know, rinse them under the tap. Because actually it used to be on the packaging, especially with rigid lenses, it used to be that it said rinse them under the tap. And now we tend not to say that. So that person may have actually just been misinformed many years ago.